What's up everyone, my name is MarkHawk and today we're going over NEOpine's GoPro snorkel mask. Now it's also known by a few other names such as the NDM-1 or the Ninja mask. It's actually made by a bunch of manufacturers and comes in a bunch of different varieties, but the reason why we're looking at NEOpine's in particular is because it has a GoPro mount on the top of the mask. Now this mask is a little different than snorkel masks you maybe typically are used to seeing in the past, and that's because it's a full face snorkel mask. This allows us to have a lot of visibility on the left and right. It's not obscured, it's a little bit distorted, but it gives us a lot more visibility than a traditional snorkel mask. And since this is a full face mask, it's actually going to help keep our face nice and warm in colder water. We were actually testing it in 55-degree temperature water, that's about 12 to 14 degree water, and we actually felt pretty good, and its operating depths are around 9 to 12 feet. It also has a snorkel attachment that we'll get into in a little bit here, but it has this little plastic ball that prevents water from being inhaled into the mask itself. Before we get too far into this review, I feel it's kind of important that you know what perspective this review is coming from. Now, it's coming from someone that's not really a huge fan of water, and it's not so much that I don't appreciate things like snorkeling and diving. I think it's beautiful. I'm just kind of terrified of it. I'm not a very strong swimmer. I'm not very graceful in water. Anyone who's been on this channel can sort of attest to that, and yeah, I just kind of have this tremendous fear of water because of these things, and having something like a mask that gives me more visibility or prevents me from inhaling a ton of water is kind of a huge perk to me because it just makes me feel a little more confident in the water. I know that might seem a little silly, but I kind of wanted to be very upfront when I say this mask is helping me cope with a lot of that in the water. One of my big fears with snorkeling was I couldn't really see what was in my peripheral vision. Now this mask has a really good amount of visibility, and then since it is that full face, it does help keep my face nice and warm, and I felt very comfortable the entire time I was wearing it. I never felt like water was going to seep in or anything like that. We did have some minor fogging issues, but that was mainly because of the way I removed the mask, and any sort of fogging issues can basically be reduced with some sort of applications that you can get out on the side. As I mentioned earlier, we have this snorkel attachment that features this little plastic ball in the breathing tube. Now this ball is really important. It actually stays locked in the tube and it freely rolls around, so you hear it rolling around. It's not broken or anything like that. And when you dive underwater, it helps block the passage of water from getting into the snorkel mask itself. So since our entire face is in the mask, our nose and our mouth, even if we sort of panic and inhale deeply, we're not going to get any water inside the mask, and it's going to prevent people like me from just swallowing a ton of water accidentally or in a huge panic and then swimming to the top and just coughing up a ton of salt water. Of course, the real reason why this was sent to me for review is because it has the GoPro mount adapter on it. So the big benefit to actually it being this little prong system here is we're not limited to what action camera we can use. The only real limitation here is the design of the camera. So cameras that are a little bit longer or have that tube-shaped design, those will be a little harder to mount. But things like the GoPro mount on there just fine, the Garmin Verb XE mounts on there just fine. Even though it's a little bit heavier, we were still able to maintain a really nice suction to our face with the mask, even with the heavier camera on there. Now, having this sort of front-mounted GoPro perspective is really good, but I kind of would use this as a sort of secondary perspective. I do feel that something like a Polar Pro's, maybe a handheld floating mount, is a little bit better, along with their sort of diving attachment. That way you can keep your hands free, clip it on a belt, pull it out afterwards. I feel like that's a really good companion tool to a mask like this, but it's really good to have this as a sort of an added perspective of a dive to cut to footage from what you were seeing in that perspective. But I feel when you're filming underwater, having things like an extension pole will definitely help sort of incorporate you into the environment a lot better. Because just that perspective alone of just what you're seeing on the mask, your head is constantly turning. It's very disorienting and hard to rewatch, but it is really good to sort of cut to that footage when you see something spectacular, then go back to your extension pole that puts you and your friends back in the environment. Anyway, just wrap it up. I think NEOpine's snorkel mask is a really good mask for somebody who's, in my perspective, that's basically very amateur, that panics a lot in water. It makes me a lot more confident in water, and it does have that added benefit of giving us a different perspective when we are filming underwater and just having that sort of backup B-roll. I don't think it's a good primary source for GoPro footage, but it definitely doesn't hurt to have a little more camera coverage when you're filming underwater. Anyway, I'm MarkHawk, and if you found this video useful, please press that like and share button in the bottom. It helps me out tremendously. Also, head on over to our Patreon page if you're feeling super generous, and you can throw a few dollars to YouTubers my way to help keep things like this up and going. But if not, don't worry about it. Press that like and share. It helps me out almost just as much. We have a ton more reviews. Check them out on our channel. I'm MarkHawk, and I'll see you all out there. Have a good one, everyone.